Good morning, everyone. Good morning, students. So proud to have you here. Welcome to the Peoria Riverfront Museum. It's such an exciting time at this, the only multidisciplinary museum of our kind in the nation. Art, science, history, achievement. It's such an exciting time when we bring new content to lift people up. And today, we add railroaders, Jack Delano's Homefront photography, and more treasures from our permanent collection, design and duplication, to T-Rex that is staying through September 16th. So what a big day it is. The most diverse programming we've ever had at this museum opens tomorrow morning at the Peoria Riverfront Museum. So the board of directors helps lead this museum forward, raise the money to support this privately funded museum, helps give us the inspiration we have as a terrific staff and volunteer and member and visionary society base here. And the chairman of the Board of Trustees here at the Peoria Riverfront Museum is Steve Jackson, who is also the CEO of his own companies, the Prairie Home Alliance. He leads a terrific board of directors to move this community forward through the tool that this museum represents. So please help me welcome to the lectern to help kick us off today, the chairman of the board, Steve Jackson.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. It's another exciting day at the Peoria Riverfront Museum with the opening of the two exhibits that John just spoke of. I'd like to express my special appreciation for myself and on behalf of the board of directors for you, Bon French, and all that you have done for this museum and continue to do. I don't have much railroad experience, but I can tell you this, 1963, I dressed up as an engineer to go trick-or-treating. So I was 6, I'm old enough that was actually a thing. So young boys tended to be either hobos or engineers, kind of both railroad related from an earlier era, but there's such a romantic mystique about the railroads. I'm so delighted to have this exhibit here. I took a few minutes this morning to walk around and read some of the backstories about the people in the pictures, and it truly is a treasure, which is a little ironic because we're talking about our own treasures being here as well. And as most of you know, probably advocates and supporters of the museum, the 4 pillars here are art, history, science, and achievement. And that's what's unique about this exhibit is we're talking about each of those items. And to me, it's extra wonderful that these things come right out of our own collections. I'd like to say just a minute more, one thing else about you, Bon. You know, there's a lot of people that have achieved financial success, and that's always one way to measure success in a life. There's a lot of people over the years that develop philanthropic hearts, and that's another measure of success in my opinion. And then when you take that financial success, philanthropy, and mix that with a generous spirit of humility, that's actually extraordinary. I can't tell you how much we appreciate you and what you mean to us. So I just want to say thank you. I'm delighted you're all here. I'm glad to see the students here. And you may or may not know, we've had the opportunity to extend T-Rex being here through the Christmas holidays. Most of our desire to do that was about you guys, was about the Every Student Initiative, and we're super excited about that. If you can't find something in this museum today to excite you, engage you, or help you to learn something, you're just not trying very hard. It's a wonderful place with a lot of things going on, and again, I just want to express appreciation on my behalf and the great board of directors here. So thank you all very much for being here. And John, are you coming back up? John will tell you some real things. I always talk from my heart. He's a much better fact-based person, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve Jackson. Today we kick off Railroaders, Jack Delano's Homefront photography. We stand and sit here amidst some of the most incredible photographs taken in American history, particularly during a point of time. And Bon French will talk to us in a few minutes. But as Steve mentioned, Bon French, a native son of Peoria, a Woodruff graduate, Northwestern proud alumnus, double alumnus from Northwestern, sits on the Board of Trustees, one of their top leaders on the board. Also chaired the Chicago History Museum of Board of Directors, as well as presently chairs the Center for Railroad Photography and Art, based in Madison, Wisconsin. And it was the Center for Railroad Photography and Art and the Chicago History Museum who 6 years ago pulled together this remarkable exhibition. For the first time ever, 60 of the more than 2,000 Jack Delano photographs. And today we are joined not only by Bon French, the native son come home and sponsor of this exhibition, we are joined by the president of the Center for Railroad Photography, Scott Lotus, and his team, Haley Page and Inga, did I get the right? Velta. So 3 times twice. 2 times, 3 times. So the Center for Railroad Photography and Art is one of the most incredible little nonprofits in our entire country. They have a very specialized and focused mission to help lift up this art form that tells the story of America. And if briefly I could ask, since he has driven from Madison, Wisconsin, the leader of that organization, to just say a word about what the Center for Railroad Photography and Art is. Please help me welcome Scott Lotus.
Thank you, John, and thank you everyone for being here today to take part in a celebration and commemoration of railroading, this great institution of American history, and the art form that helps preserve it, and I think helps us understand something about our past. The Center for Railroad Photography and Art, as John so graciously mentioned, is a nonprofit based in Madison, Wisconsin. We're national and even international in scope, with a mission to preserve and present significant images of railroading. We have our own archive that now has over 500,000 photographs in it, but we also work with other materials in the world, and these from the Library of Congress, as John said, are some of the most significant and beautiful prints made of the railroads in the 20th century. And they show the nation at a critical time. They show not only the trains, but they show the people. And the people have always been the backbone of the railroad. These are tremendous machines, but it is the people that make them go, and it's the people still today that make them go. We heard a train go by just now, and that's still right out there moving American freight, helping our economy be strong, and it's all driven by the people behind the scenes doing that work. And these photographs, I think, exemplify what we try to lift up at the center, the stories not only of the railroads, but of the people behind them, and of the culture and the art form that is all part of railroading, and that is also a part of our experience as Americans. So it's just an absolute privilege to be able to share these photographs at this great museum, the Peoria Riverfront Museum, with the people here. Thank you so much for allowing us to make this possible, and Bon, it all starts with you. Thank you so much for putting this exhibition together and helping us to work behind the scenes and to bring it here. John, it's a privilege to be here, and thank you.
You're welcome, Scott. Thank you. This is a privately funded museum, and so everyone here, the audience, everyone watching via live stream, everyone, thank you for what you do to invest in this place to make it possible. I would like to recognize now one of our Visionary Society Council members, a great corporation in our community, who stepped up to join Bon French to give even more resources beyond what he did to pull, and Bon pulled the whole thing together, but it was Commerce Bank who helped us do even more to promote, do things with the schools, do so much more. And John Williams, the Peoria president of Commerce, is with us. John, could you say a minute about why Commerce is involved with this exhibition? John Williams.
Very glad to be a sponsor of this exhibit. From my perspective, why I find this so exciting, it helps refresh the image of some of our history here in Peoria, some of our deep history. During the pre-Prohibition days, a majority of railroad tracks, frankly, went through, you guessed it, Peoria, Illinois. And they went through to move whiskey out of town and a lot of other things. But, we still have a massive amount of railroads that come through this region due to that initial infrastructure built into the community. So I think part of our interest is continuing to remind folks of the history we have in the Peoria area, followed by the amazing artwork that's displayed in this exhibit. Thank you for the opportunity, and I'll hand it back to John.
Students, you're going to play a role in this program at the end, so stay tuned. It's a big role, not yet. It's a big role. So, if 3 people could join me, along with the board chairman, to help bring Bond French up, and I'd like to give you a little token of our appreciation for what you did to help pull this together. Scott, if you'd come forward, John back forward, Steve Jackson step forward, and Bond French step forward, and Anne Marie Miller, our Vice President for Development. We have a small token of appreciation for what you all have done to help pull this exhibition together. Railroaders, Jack Delano's Homefront Photography, and hopefully you can pridefully display these. Hold them up so we can get a picture of that. So thanks to everyone who made this exhibition possible. Perfect. Did you get the picture? That is the question. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're also joined by Sally Snyder, who is a Director Emerita of the museum, our first ever, and the leader of our Every Student Initiative program, and we'll be bringing her up at the end. But right now, with all of us standing by, let's help welcome the man of the hour, a person whose mother was the first docent in the history of museums in Peoria, the old Lakeview Museum. May she rest in peace. We lost her this year. A person whose late father was a former chairman of the board of our predecessor museum, Lakeview Museum of Arts and Sciences. From Joan Trenchard French, the docent, to Taylor French, the decoy lover, duck hunter, and chairman of this board, we have Bond French today, our patron and a great native son of Peoria. Let's all give it up for Bond French.
I wish my parents were here to hear that welcome, actually, or my wife and 2 kids. So thank you very much for that, again, a tremendous introduction. I'm very pleased to be here. As John said, I did grow up in Peoria. Went to Woodruff High School, graduated in '71. I was just here a month ago celebrating my 50th class reunion. We had a great turnout, and it was a lot of fun. As John also indicated, my parents believed that it was very important to give back to the community, and so I just grew up with that as something that was expected. You know, whether it was your church, museums, Southside Mission, whatever it was, we've been very involved in that and continue to be so. So I just felt it was important to give back to the community as well, even though I live in the western suburbs of Chicago. So with that, I love history and I love trains. And this exhibition brings those 2 things together in a big way. And what's relevant about history is it connects the present to the past and the past to the present. And there are a lot of lessons there, and we're shaped, our geography is even shaped today by where the railroads were built, including the geography of downtown Peoria. So at one point, there were 14 different railroad companies that came into Peoria on 19 different lines. And I grew up thinking that was normal. It isn't normal. It's extraordinary. So there are still at least 9 railroads here and more than a dozen lines. And as John said, they're busy hauling a lot of goods and services, you know, from Caterpillar on down in and out of Peoria, which remains a major manufacturing center. So this exhibition is about people. That's another thing that I was drawn to when the Center for Railroad Photography and Art first began this project 10 years ago. Researching the lives of the people in these Jack Delano photographs that were taken in the winter of 1942 and 1943. He was on assignment from the Farm Security Administration, which was part of the federal government, and he was tasked as a professional photographer to document workers on the home front. And the railroaders were one of his biggest projects, because during the war the railroads moved 99% of all the freight and all of the people in the country, and they were critical to the war effort. They were strained by that, and so the workers were strained. And this exhibit once, was set up to show the appreciation for the hard work, long hours that they put in behind the scenes on the war front. The other thing that Delano did was he didn't photograph the executives. I'm sure they were pulling their hair out too, trying to make the railroad run smoothly. But he photographed on the ordinary workers, and they were people of color. There were many immigrant families that made a huge contribution to the railroad industry and to society, and they were women. And so all are featured here, which I think makes it particularly relevant in 2021. The founder of the center, John Gruber, who passed away just a few years ago, was the genius behind this project to re-examine Delano's work from 70-some years ago, and then to have the idea that he would research the stories behind the people in the photograph. Fortunately, he recorded most of the names of the people, not all of them, but many of them. And through digital research, which probably couldn't have been done years ago, the center was able to literally track down the descendants 70 years after the photos were taken, and travel all over the country, but particularly in Chicago, all of Chicago's neighborhoods, to knock on doors and find the sons and daughters and grandsons and nieces and nephews and so forth, and find out more about the people in the photos. So those stories are very important. In fact, I think the most interesting part of this exhibition, to learn about these immigrant families, to learn about the people of color and what they did when they, came northward in the Great Migration in the early part of the 1900s and worked on the railroads, who were very willing to hire people of color and immigrants. And so many of those people worked their whole lives, 40 and 50 years, for the same railroad, repairing freight cars or working as a Pullman porter or whatever. They made good money and supported their families, and their families went on with that leg up to go to school and have even better lives than the people in these photos did. And what we found out was many of these families, particularly the minorities, went on to become doctors and lawyers and professors at universities. So we were uncovering a true American story here, and it's very heartfelt, actually. The other thing that we looked into, which we had no idea was going to happen, was, you may have heard of Gary Sinise, the famous actor who was Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump, and starred in other movies and TV shows. It has the Lieutenant Dan band and so forth. Well, it turns out his grandfather and his father and uncle were subjects of this photography. We didn't know that they had a famous grandson, Gary Sinise, but turns out that was just luck. And so the Sinise family was especially featured, again, just luck, because the union recommended he and his family to be photographed literally at home, representing sort of the all-American railroad family, which the government also wanted to document. So there are 56 photos in the total, not all here, but 56 photos of the Sinise family at their home in Blue Island, Illinois, in the south side of Chicago. And so we connected with Gary Sinise, and he was thrilled to see this exhibition, which featured his family. He was in tears over it. He had not seen many of the photographs of his family that were taken in the early 40s, And he knew his grandparents and obviously his parents and uncles and so forth very, very well. And they were still alive when we had the original opening, his parents, his dad, and his uncle, for the original opening for this exhibit in Chicago in 2014. So they were actually there, present, and were the only two people at the opening who are still alive, actually, who were actually photographed in the early 40s. So anyway, that was a special twist to the whole thing, and Gary's Sinise is very aware that this opening is taking place, that these photographs have been brought out of hibernation from the Chicago History Museum and brought to Peoria, and he's very excited about it. So he's thrilled to have this on display. I don't know what else you might like me to touch on, John. I would just say that there's a lot of magic in these photos if you know what you're looking at, and I'll just illustrate one here. Right behind me is a photograph of the Milwaukee Road Bensonville yard, and in the distance is a town, looks north, and the distance is a town of Orchard Park. There's a church steeple and a school present and homes and so forth. And during the war, the government built a small airstrip in Orchard Park. This is near Schiller Park, Franklin Park, Bensonville, what's now suburban Chicago on the west side. And that was called Orchard Field. After the war, and they produced airplanes there actually, and after the war then, the city of Chicago was looking to expand out of a very crowded Midway airport and turned Orchard Field into O'Hare. So what's in this? So I've replicated this photograph in recent times. You can still stand on the same embankment and look north, but all you see is O'Hare in concrete in the background. You would have no idea that in the middle of O'Hare was a small village with a church and a school and everything called Orchard Park. And if you know the call letters of O'Hare, it's O-R-D. That's Orchard, not O'Hare. So that's where the call letters came from, because it was Orchard Field, and they had call letters, and it was O-R-D. And then it was originally Orchard Field commercially, and then in memory of Butch O'Hare, who was killed in the Pacific as a fighter pilot, they renamed Orchard Field O'Hare. So some people think that O'Hare somehow morphs into O-R-D, but it doesn't. It's Orchard. And there's a picture of Orchard Park, Illinois, there. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Bon. Every one of these photographic images tells us a great story from what, just like Bon told. How many people knew that O'Hare Airport's call letters, O-R-D, came from that photograph, Orchard? How many knew that before? One. Well, we all know it now, students. We all know it now. So, quick story. Bon French went to Woodruff High School, goes on to Northwestern, goes into business, but he has a hobby. He likes to take pictures of trains. So he goes all over the country taking pictures of trains and railroads, railroaders, and 40 of those trips were with Dick Newmiller, who was once the mayor of Peoria and whose daughter is the chief operating officer for the Peoria Riverfront Museum, Kate Skurman, today. So I can only imagine what Bon and Dick Newmiller, what they would talk about, getting that train and waiting for this one to come in. And anyone here who has a love of trains and what they represent about the fabric of America knows how magic this is. And some of you in this audience, and I will not point out Dr. Steve Cullinan because he told me not to, but some of you in this audience know the power of this story, and as it pertains to our own community and it pertains to the great American landscape. So now, we opened 2 exhibitions simultaneously, and to tell us briefly about the other exhibition that opens today is our lead curator, who has worked with his team of curators, Zach Zetterberg and Renee Kerrigan, who's out of town and training for a new planetarium system, and Elizabeth Day, who's new on the curatorial team, and worked hand in hand with our education team. We call them the E-team, with Barb Dawson, our Director of Education, who is here, and her talented, almost entirely new team, and all of the staff of the Peoria Riverfront Museum who worked so hard. Let's hear now about treasures, the new treasures in the gallery adjacent to us, from our lead curator, Bill Conger.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I am really excited for railroaders and equally excited for our newest iteration of the Treasures brand of our collections exhibitions that we are hosting. As a kind of a part two to the exhibition we just hosted, 101 Treasures from the Peoria Riverfront Museum's collection, we decided to bring out 10 more and keep the party going. So our curators and team that John mentioned, and thank you, John, for mentioning all those people. I want to make sure that our curators, Zach Zetterberg, Elizabeth Day, who's curatorial assistant, helped us, and Renee Kerrigan, of course, our science curator, who's not here today. We all kind of doubled down and examined the collection and came up with 10 fascinating stories of art, history, science, and achievement that really span the entirety of our collection. And we are focusing on design and duplication in the broadest sense. Design and duplication can be found in nature as much as it can be found in the works of Andy Warhol and Isamu Noguchi that we are featuring in the exhibition. We'll have minerals. We have a display of our famous coverlets from our quilt and coverlet collection here. 2 brand new decoys that we have added to the collection as well. An amazing assortment that I believe will continue the community's fascination with our collection and allow us to tell deeper stories. Along with every one of these 10 vignettes that you will experience in design and duplication, we will be installing QR codes that will allow each curator of various areas to give you a little deeper dive on each object. So we're very excited to unveil that as well, so stay tuned in the near future. So without further ado, I want to thank you again for being here and give the mic back to John. Thank you.
Students, in the next room over there is something called the Tully Monster. It's the state fossil of Illinois, and the Peoria Riverfront Museum owns the greatest, best preserved Tully Monster fossil in existence. So when you go around the corner, there's an artist rendering of what the Tully Monster would have looked like. Pretty cool. Now's the moment we've all been waiting for, students. Join me up here. I want all the students to come forward. Bond French to come up here. I want Sally Schneider, the chair of our Every Student Initiative, to come up here. Now come on this side of me as well. Come over here. There's for you, Bond. Okay. All right. Now spread all the way down here, a little bit further down. Come on the other side there. Okay, what grades are you in?
Fifth.
Fifth grade. Where do you go to school?
Lincoln.
Lincoln? Roosevelt? Glen Oak. We got 3 schools represented. Okay, and let's get Mr. Conger over here, our lead curator. Come over here. John Williams, come up here. Scott, please join us. Okay. Now, everyone look at Bond French. He's going to give us a demonstration on how to blow a train whistle. Okay, so you see that end of it right there? Okay, now, on a count of 3, we're going to dedicate this exhibition to the inspiration of the people of Central Illinois on behalf of the board. And Steve Jackson, come on, the chairman of our board. Here we go, Steve. Here we go. Okay, we ready? on behalf of the Board of Directors and all of us, we dedicate these exhibitions to the inspiration of the people of Central Illinois. All aboard! There we go! There we go! Here comes the train. Thank you all for coming. Keep up the inspiration. Thank you, students.